Hey everyone, welcome to this talk. My name is Andy Burgess. I am a filmmaker and content creator based in East London. East London? East London. There we go. I can't even talk today. Thank you for joining. This is kind of like the simplest way to introduce myself. In the world of making videos on YouTube and social media, we kind of wear a ton of different hats. So that's just like how I find it the most easy way to introduce myself. So I focus on making visually compelling explainers that kind of break down specific topics to an audience without overwhelming them or overloading them with too much information. I guess the goal is to kind of entertain you whilst at the same time educating you on a certain topic. And I try to take an audience on a journey vicariously whilst exploring a subject matter that might be foreign to them, or maybe they come away learning something new that they didn't necessarily feel like they like wanted to know, or like I basically don't want it to make it feel like a school history lesson or something I'm explaining. I'm also the creator, producer, and host of Red Bull Origins, which stems from this same formula, but it's kind of on a bigger scale. And that's today what I'm going to break down. I'm going to break down the process of how we make that show. So I want to dive into some details on the scripting, the researching, the gear, like the logistics, and I want to leave some time at the end for people to ask whatever questions they want. I'm happy to get really specific about like my processes and stuff. So it's a lot, and I'm gonna try and cram it into like this half an hour talk, and hopefully find it interesting and insightful. And yeah, so we'll have some time for questions at the end. But let me just give you a little bit of background on myself to provide some context on what Origins is and why it isn't like a traditional film production. So I guess I didn't go to film school. I didn't study film. I always enjoyed film, and I was always a creative person. But I was in music for a long time. I was a musician for many years. And in 2016, I realized that my real passion was like storytelling. And I wanted to tell some different stories and videos, but I didn't really know how to do that. And the only camera I had was my phone, the one I had in my pocket. So I was on a trip in Switzerland, and I started making these Snapchat stories. Essentially, I just started making these 10-second videos and putting them together and trying to create these vertical stories. And long story short, that turned into something that I did every day of 2017. In beginning of 2017, I'd moved to New York City. I'd left my marketing job, and I was just making these Snapchat stories every day. And I just kept doing that. And over time, I started to work with different brands and produce content on their platforms and on my social channels. And from that, I got to travel the world as a full-time creator. And over the years, my emphasis moved away from focusing on just me and like telling stories vertically, but it was like, how can I tell creative, compelling stories that are about something else that is more than just kind of what I'm doing? And that kind of leads us into what we're going to talk about today, which is Origins. So Origins is a show that I pitched to Red Bull in the summer of 2019 after working on a few other small social innovation videos with them. And essentially, I wanted to take my love of travel, extreme sports, and understanding different cultures and blend them into these like 10 to 15 minute short documentaries that would live first and foremostly on YouTube. You can find them on Facebook and Red Bull TV too, but this is like a YouTube centric show. And what Red Bull does great is that they are really great at showcasing action and extreme sports in their content. But with Origins, I wanted to take those extreme clips and bring a bit of humanity to the athletes involved, and discovering alongside them the history of their sport and the stories of the people or the ancestors of the people who are kind of linked to the origins of that sport. And because it's an internet first show, it doesn't follow conventional TV show rules. It looks beautiful, but it's rough around the edges. I host it, and it has a very vlog feeling to it. So we try to make it like very beautiful, but at the same time, it's like still this like raw YouTube video where like you kind of feel like you're coming along with me and the athlete in like this friendly, immersive world. So I guess just to give you a bit of context about the show, I'm going to quickly play you a trailer from episode 3 about the origins of skiing that we shot up above the Arctic Circle last November. So this is the trailer, and hope you enjoy.
The sport of skiing in the Alps is developed up in the hills. The traditional way was going in the valleys, actually avoiding the dangerous and difficult terrain.
I'm old enough where my first skis were wooden skis. It's tough going downhill on those things. It's completely different.
Are you ready to try some cross-country skiing?
Well, I'm ready. Are you ready?
It's not the skiing I learned.
Have reindeer boots on and a little strap. The oldest ski boot system in the world.
Back in the days, for a couple of thousand years back then, in the summertime there was walking, in the wintertime there was skiing.
These are the Sami people, an indigenous group that inhabits this region of Scandinavia called Sapmi. But it's here in this region that spans these 4 countries where the Sami people have used skis as a form of transportation and survival for more than 6,000 years.
Skis are a special Sami invention.
I love how it's all mountain-based, but how different it can be. Skiing for you is like part of your life. It's how you work, whereas for me and I don't know, everyone in Europe, it's just like a leisure sport. And I think where you see it going in the future is it being more accessible to people to be able to get out, explore, and just to be in nature. I mean, look at us.
Look at this.
It's beautiful.
See how big these skis are?
There's some big skis. The skis are so big, they're in feet and not in centimeters.
So hopefully from that you got a premise of the show and what it is, what it's kind of like. Also, just a quick side note, if you guys do have any questions, like whenever you have them, just throw them in the chat. I'm going to do a bit of a Q&A at the end. I'm leaving like 5 to 10 minutes for that. So if you put them in the chat, when you think about them, I can scroll through at the end and just look at them. So whenever something comes to mind or you want to know something a little more, throw it in there. Yeah, so that was episode 3. Maybe my favorite to shoot up in the Arctic. It was just a crazy premise. And yeah, these are the episodes we've shot so far. The pilot we shot last January, which was in Hawaii, all about the origins of bodyboarding. And then the rest of the series actually got greenlit like this time last year. So like just before the pandemic hit, which obviously put things into a trickier situation, so we couldn't film as many. And then we shot an episode on fencing in Italy in November, skiing around the same time, and we are in pre-production on a parkour episode, which was going to be shot at the same time, but that's going to be coming soon, hopefully. So that is the plan with the episodes. And yeah, so that's the premise. And in today's session, I want to break down the process of making this series. How did we make this YouTube documentary explainer series, all that kind of stuff. So first up, it is a creator-led show. So why do Red Bull want to make these creator-led shows? And what that kind of means is they take someone like me who has a YouTube channel. I make YouTube videos and I come from that side of the world rather than a traditional production company that will have a massive crew. And they see the benefits in like YouTube content. It lives on YouTube, so it should be made to feel like it's YouTube. It's a small, nimble team over having like a big production company. It's I essentially wear a ton of hats. I produce it, I host it, I direct it, I edit it, and I have some other people involved that I'll get into in a second. But there's just like a lot that we can do with a small, nimble team. Like it has a decent budget, but compared to like other big Red Bull projects or something that would involve a lot more people and time and resources, we can make it for like a fraction of the cost, and it's super easy just to get a couple of us out there. So that's kind of something that also helps with the show and makes it succeed. When we were going into the second or third episode, I got an email from like a graphics company, a graphic design company, and they're like, hey, we'd love to help you out with your animations and illustrations. And my brother does all of that work for me. and I just was curious how much this like graphic design company wanted, and they quoted me something like 10 grand just to do the animations on this show. And to me, that is bizarre. Like, that's something me and my brother Tim just do anyway. We've learned these skills and we do them. So like, why wouldn't we like develop that ourselves? I think it's a big part of the show is how it looks, and I like being involved in that. And I think that's kind of what you're going to find throughout the process of this, how this goes. Yeah, so kind of let me show you who's involved in this production. So there's 3 different stages I'm going to talk through today: pre-production, production, and post-production. So in the first case, in the first episode, I did all sort of the pre-production on my own. And I had a local producer. And now I'm in a place where I have myself, a local producer, someone who's on the ground, who knows people we can talk to. They know about the sport and they can just set stuff up. Like when I'm in Hawaii, I don't know the best places to film in, like for surfing, or the best people to talk to. A local producer knows those things. So they're really important. I then have my Red Bull producer who helps me a lot with like securing the athletes we want to talk to, or helping with my scripting and making sure the story is aligned to the Red Bull branding. Not that there is kind of too much of that, but they oversee it and they help to build that out. And I really love having my producer Lucas on board. He basically is thinking what I'm thinking, but 3 steps ahead. And I love that. And then I also have an assistant producer. I brought on an assistant for episode 2 and 3 and 4 to kind of just help out with licensing, permits, all that kind of stuff. The admin stuff that I'm not very good at. First and foremost, I make videos. Like that admin stuff is not my thing. So like I bring in someone who really likes that. And then when we shoot, like I said, it's a really small team. It's myself. I host it. I help shoot additional B-roll. We have the athlete who comes along with us. And then I have a cinematographer on board, somebody who like helps, like their focus is to shoot these beautiful landscapes that we go into, or help shoot the beautiful action shots that we're doing. A local producer or fixer, like I mentioned before. Like when you're in the Arctic, the most important thing is you need somebody who knows what the hell they're doing, somebody that can keep us safe and knows the area. And then Lucas, Red Bull producer, comes along on some of those shoots. So 4 or 5 of us. And then in post-production, it's like really small. It's myself doing most of the editing. My assistant producer helps out cutting interviews and transcribing them. And then, as I mentioned, my brother Tim helps out with illustration and motion graphics. And then I have someone color the show afterwards. I really enjoy the post-production process, but I like to hand off things that I'm maybe not as good at, or feel like someone could do better. Like, for example, I'm colorblind, so my color grades aren't the best. So I bring in my friend Angelo, who is just kind of great at that. So that's kind of like the people we have involved and kind of how that works. And then we move into pre-production. I think pre-production is the most important part of this show. This is what brings everything together. And it's really important to kind of have a roadmap. So when I pitched this show to Red Bull, and they were like, okay, let's move forward with a pilot, I had to produce this development pitch. This is a huge deck, as you can kind of see, with lots of writing, but it essentially lays out a lot of different things. It's like who I am, what we want this show to be, the structure of an episode, different episode ideas, what the pilot would look like a rough script, and what the series would look like and feel like and sound like, and the graphics and the equipment and the people involved. And this took a while, but what was so good about this was I then had a roadmap. Like I knew what Origins was going to look like. So going forward, like I had already, the first episode we shot in Hawaii, I had written that story maybe like 4 months before. And that really helped when I got into the edit. And this is something that I hadn't done too much of before. This document here, I don't need you or want you to have to read all of this information, but this is kind of what my pre-production lists look like for when we shot that first episode in Hawaii. Now, just give you a bit of background on how I normally did videos before, was I kind of did a lot of this stuff did it all myself, and I didn't prep too much before my YouTube videos. For example, before the pandemic, I traveled a lot, and I was in Venice for a meeting, and I had like 4 hours to explore the city of Venice. And I was like, okay, but there's a story here I really want to make. I want to tell the story of like, why is Venice sinking? Like mass tourism and all those things. And I was literally writing a couple of notes on my phone as I was pulling up to Venice. We ran around the city in 4 hours. 4 hours, shot everything we needed, and then in post-production I kind of built the story. And that's kind of how I worked. It's very run and gun and guerrilla style filmmaking, and Origins is like that to an extent when we're on the ground, but a lot of prep needs to be done up front. Like we have to, if you're looking at some of these things, we need to have budgets sorted or licenses for film permits and making sure contracts are in order and lots of boring stuff that is very important. And schedules, and I'm going to get into some of that, but I had to learn a lot of that on the job, and it's something I hadn't done much of, and I learned it all. And after Hawaii, I was like, okay, great, for the next episodes I need someone to help me with some of these things. I can do them, but if I can bring someone else on, I can then focus on looking at the scripts and that side of things. So this is kind of what my basic script now looks like. I just wanted to share this with you. I think it's a video, so if I play it, it's gonna maybe do some, no, okay. So it's not. Anyway, I have these 2 columns, and I think my script is it's really important. I even do this on my trips. Venice was like a different case, but I write a story afterwards. I do a lot of research, and that's what we have to do on Origins, is like we have to do a lot of research on where we're going, the people that we are going to meet, the people that I want to interview, like what is why do we want to go up to the Arctic Circle to meet up with these indigenous people to tell the story about skiing? Like what is in that story? So I basically built that out together with my Red Bull producer. This is kind of like our script, and then on the right, is generic information I write down. I guess it's essentially like a shot list or like an idea that I have in mind. For this fencing episode, I wanted it to open like it looked like a Western film. And I'm going to play that to you in a minute, and you're going to see like these low angle shots. And then we also like fact check stuff and throw it all in there. So I love using Google Docs for pre-production. It's just like a game changer. Like whoever's involved can just jump in, and it's really useful. And then we like adjust these a lot, and we move around. And I want to show you this script because this is basically a version that I had of the intro for our fencing episode. And if you can see at the bottom, the wording is a little bit different to the one on the right. We basically shot this episode and then realized that it was too lengthy. It was too wordy. And because it's YouTube, you want to grab people's attention quickly. So we're like, okay, what are the big important points from this episode, and how can we concisely get that across? So we wrote a new version of it, and I just re-recorded the voiceover. So I like having a script, but you should also remember that it's not gospel. Like it can change and adapt all the time, because when you're on shoots, that always happens. And the only other things I guess to mention with my script is that I don't write the conclusion until I have experienced that trip, because like I learned about fencing for the first time. I done my research. I can do what I can find online, and I can read through articles and Wikipedia and prep. But it isn't until I meet these athletes, or I meet these people that have had that own a fencing school and have like 4 generations back of people that are involved in fencing and what fencing means to them and the sport of today. I can only get those things from experiencing it. So my conclusion, I kind of write in my last few days when I'm on the trip. I share it with Lucas, and then we go out and we shoot that on site, just like whack a tripod down in a nice location and shoot it. That's literally how I do my outros. So let me quickly play you, I think it's up next, the intro to fencing. And you can kind of, if you've been looking at this script screen, you're going to see where it's going to go and how it actually played out. Okay, I think this is it. There we go.
see that?
This is Olga Karlin. She is a fencing 4-time world champion and Olympic gold medalist. As soon as I stepped out onto that fencing mat, I knew it wasn't going to go well. I also didn't get the memo about the socks. But let's rewatch that again, and this time, have a look at how fast she's moving. And I say that because fencing is one of the fastest sports in the world. And on the surface, it's kind of hard to follow. It's not very accessible, and you might even question what makes it extreme. And the reason for that goes back centuries, to an age where 30,000 men were killed whilst practicing the discipline. Yet, fencing still continues to thrive and evolve.
It has the vision to be like a UFC.
Because it's such a captivating sport to watch if your eyes know what they should be looking for.
Okay, so that is the intro to our fencing episode, which I also think is a great little piece. The reason I wanted to do fencing was because when I was given it, people like, every time I mention it, people are like, fencing, an extreme sport. And that was the exact reason I wanted to do it, because I wanted to change people's perceptions on what they thought of fencing, like this old sport that like is like with these swords. And it's a really fascinating sport. It's actually, I had the most fun partaking in that one, even though I was not dressed properly. But fencing an Olympic athlete was rather insane. So basically, to get to this point, you had to do all that prep, and that's the most important bit. And then we kind of get onto the fun bit, right? Which is actually being on the ground. I've also seen that there is some questions in the chat already. Thank you so much. Some of them will be answered in this, but again, feel free to just share your questions there and I'll pick them up at the end. So being on the ground, production, obviously, like that is kind of the most exciting bit. In a really weird way, maybe you'll think this is like absolute BS, but I didn't think about being able to go to Hawaii, like these beautiful islands. Like that wasn't in the forefront of my mind when I was writing this episode. I was like, oh wow, the origins of surfing is really exciting, and bodyboarding, and okay, it's out in Polynesia, let's do it in Hawaii. The location came second, but like when you're actually there, it's like beautiful, and it's like this amazing experience. And each episode is kind of different. It takes like a different amount of time to shoot. So like Hawaii, for example, was 10 days because we had to travel to multiple islands, and we had to wait for good surf conditions because we had to shoot some surf scenes. And we were literally sat on beaches for like 3 or 4 days while our athlete Hugo was surfing, and we were filming him. Like it just takes a long time. We shot most of the talking and the B-roll on the big island in the first like 5 days. That was beautiful. And then we got all the surf stuff afterwards. And it was just a case of like, I was sat there with my drone, just hovering above the water, waiting until he goes. And in Hawaii, there is hundreds of people in the water. So Hugo might go in, and he may not catch a wave for half an hour because you have to queue and there's a certain order, and then you have to be ready to get the shots. And also he has to be happy with the line he did, like sometimes it doesn't always go to plan. So that took 10 days. And it's also on like the other side of the planet, right? So it takes a long time to get there. Whereas Italy, the fencing episode, was a 4-day trip. Now, the issue we had there was like travel restrictions because of COVID, and how do we shoot in like a COVID safe way, and getting to Rome and Bologna and Ferrara and Florence. And it was jumping about because all these things were changing, and we had to have lots of procedures in place, and we just kind of had to be ready to move. So that was tricky for different reasons, but it was a 4-day shoot, so it was really fast. So it was like a full day of shooting fencing stuff and interviews, and just like running in between them. And that's kind of a shoot I'm used to. I'm used to running around and frantically like working in that way. And I kind of love that. I think that's what I really like. And then the skiing episode was a 5-day shoot in Kiruna up on the Arctic Circle, but it was a 7-day trip because it took 2 days to get there and back. And you only had, when we went at the end of November, we only had 4 hours of sunlight a day, which was insane to think about. So we only had 4 hours of day to basically shoot everything we needed. And if we had gone like a week later, there would have been like no sunlight until kind of like now, or like February time. So we were really lucky with getting that shoot in. And we kind of prep, and these are just like a couple of photos from the shoot. That one on the left is essentially just like where we can and cannot fly our drone, because it's a big production for a big brand like Red Bull. Everything has to be legitimate and on board. And yeah, and then we've got a couple of interviews here, and then the guy with the camera here is Fraser, and then that's Lucas next to him, my Red Bull producer. So I guess that kind of brings us onto the schedule. And like I said, they can vary quite a lot. In prep, I want to be as prepared as possible, but ready to adapt, because things never go to plan. So the left schedule is basically a day in Italy. That was one of our days. We had interviews lined up, and that kind of like got shifted a bit, actually, because like some COVID rules came in the day before, which meant we could only go to certain places to film. So you just kind of have to be ready to play with those things. And then on the right, you'll see our Sweden schedule, which is much more vague. It was like more of a day-by-day basis. I had a local producer called Anders, who is like a mountaineering guide, and we were interviewing Sami people, which are these people that mainly herd reindeer. And we just had to have some time off to kind of work with them. And we had to like basically work around their schedules, and we didn't know how it was going to go, and like the conditions for skiing on certain days, and if we had the right amount of light, or like we wanted to see the northern lights, so when do we do that? So we basically had our schedule really open, and that was kind of the same for Hawaii. Like B-roll days, like we kind of prepped, we knew where we were going, and then surf days was a bit more loose. So like schedules can vary a lot on these productions, but I like to have like a basic one in place. So again, like Google Docs is like key for this. And when I get on location, like my assistant puts this together, and then when we're there, the local producer takes over, and they're just in charge of this, and I can essentially be shooting, doing lines, kind of building that rapport and relationship with our athlete or interviewing people. And then I guess like that's a big part of the show. So how do we find the right people to pick? Like I said up front, having a local producer with good knowledge is an important part of it. In Hawaii, our producer, Zach Noyle, he's like a really big surf photographer over there. And he just knows like all the big surfers and bodyboarders. So it was just a case of he was lining up these interviews, and we had loads, and it was crazy. And we actually had too many. It was a lot to cut down. The athletes sometimes have connections, and I guess finding the right person, I always have someone in mind. And in pre-production, I make point of like expressing what I'm looking for. Like I have a person in mind. For example, in the skiing episode, the Sami people we wanted to speak to must have come from a family that herd reindeers and have used skis for thousands of years. Like I wanted their ancestors to have also worked with reindeers, and I wanted to draw a parallel between them using skis to herd reindeers to how people ski now, like, or traditional cross-country skis. And our producer knew the exact person. He's like, I know a guy called Per Martin. He has a family that has herded reindeers for centuries, and he is also like an athlete. He's a cross-country skier. And I was like, okay, this is perfect. So we kind of built that in. And in other cases, like in fencing, we had a guy called Miles Chamberlain Watson, who is he's also a Red Bull athlete, but he's based in the US, and he is very much about pushing the sport forward. He wants to see, he's the guy in the video that said he wants fencing to be like the UFC. So I was like, okay, he would be a great person to talk to kind of share where the future of the sport is going to be. So Red Bull helps set that up. So that's another way of kind of linking in interviews. And yeah, like interviews, I change how I do them. I don't want them all to be like talking head. I like kind of like it when our athlete we're just like walking along, or we're casually just like chilling. I like to try and record just like the candid moments, or just us catching up, because I find that's where like the best stuff comes out of. So these are things that I'm always thinking, like when we're shooting. Wearing multiple hats, it means like your mind is on like a million different things. But if I can, basically, this is the overall thing with having a team. If I can just outsource like the logistics and someone to help with cinematography, I can just focus on like the story, because that is the most important thing overall. But I don't like to have like a massive team around. Like, I don't feel like we need that. I've always worked well with smaller equipment. So I'm going to show you some of the gear that we use. This is just a photo from my like bedroom table in Sweden in like our Airbnb. And we basically, my whole philosophy on gear is it doesn't matter. It's the story comes first. Like, if like you don't have the story, then there's no point. Like, you can show me the most beautiful B-roll in the world, but if there's no story behind it, or there's no emotive connection, then there's nothing to latch onto, right? So like, and like gear comes like as you progress. Like I said, I started out on my iPhone, and it wasn't until like 2 years in that I brought my first camera, and then I worked up a few more things, and like you kind of get into gear, and I'm like, okay, these things are exciting, I like this, but like it's not the primary thing. So with gear, I like to just have everything essentially fit into a rucksack. We shoot on Sony mirrorless cameras, the Sony A7S3s or the S2s, a drone, we have like a Ronin, a DJI Ronin stabilizer. I have like a tripod and a Gorilla Pod, and a couple of GoPros, and that's like essentially it, and like some lav mics. So really minimal setup, but it means we can get around quickly, we can be anywhere, and we can capture something at any moment. That's the most important thing for me. I don't want to take a big red camera and like miss a shot because it took me like 10 minutes to set up this camera that I'm like lugging around. Like, I don't want that. I want to be able to travel lightly and it fit in my rucksack. So moving into, I guess, like post-production. This is the edit. For me, it's the bit where the magic comes together. Everything that I prepped in development and in pre-production, and everything that we shot and thought was amazing, now comes down to this edit. This is where I get to bring Origins to life. And each of these episodes takes anywhere from between 7 to 14 days for like an initial cut. So I will spend that time cutting, and then I'll send it off to Red Bull, and then we'll do rounds of feedback. So what do we do for fencing? We shot fencing. I came home, had to quarantine for 2 weeks because I traveled to Italy, edited the whole of fencing in that time, and then flew out to Coruna to shoot the skiing episode, came back, had to quarantine again, and I edited that episode in that time, and then finished off fencing. So I love that. And this is what an initial, so what I do when I first cut stuff, I have Aaron cut interviews and transcribe them so I can easily just see them and like pick out the little bits of like the lines that someone said, and I'm like, okay, I need to remember to kind of like add that in or throw that in. I think that's like always important for me. And then I do what I call an in and out cut, which is essentially I go through all the footage, and I pick the bits that were good in each clip, and I lay them out on this timeline. And if you can see here, this timeline is all my ins and outs for Sweden, but not interviews. So let me say no interviews are in this. And the cut comes in at 7+ hours of footage. And that may seem overwhelming and a lot, but essentially that is kind of where I am with all the footage. But I know when I can jump into that, I kind of scrub through. It's all in chronological order. So I'm like, okay, that scene right there where you can see Paddy and Per Martin like pouring coffee, and we're sat around a fire. There was a really good drone shot there. Okay, boom, got it, take it. And then I put it into my main cut. And then my final main cut for Sweden kind of looked like this. So it's a bit more messy, but we cut that down to, I think, like 9 minutes, like 45 or something. But essentially, this is, where I can bring it all together. And for me, there's a few things that are really important in an edit. For me, music is a really big thing. Music and sound is so important. I think it's very emotive. If you screw up footage, you can cover it with graphics or illustrations, but you can't fix audio. And Audio is like in the interviews, you can hear what people are saying. It's very emotive. With music, I can make you feel a certain way, and then I can switch the tone and make you feel like something else. And then the pace is really important, because does this work for YouTube? Story is so important, but like, have I hooked someone in the first minute that will keep them watching throughout this piece? And then I like to share the edit with like my producer Lucas, and he looks at it, and we basically then go through and try to trim fat. And yeah, that's kind of like a quick overview of, I guess, how the story goes. Yeah, and it gets shaped into like this 10-minute piece. But that was like a quick overview. I could talk about this stuff for a long time, and in hours and hours and hours. There was so much in depth, but I would love to kind of answer whatever questions you have in the limited time that we have left. So I'm going to jump into the chat and answer them. So it can be as like nerdy as like, what frame rate do you shoot in, or like where we're going to go next, anything like that. So let me go into the chat, and I'll start with Joel Burgess. Great last name. I'm sorry, Mr. Starch's chat. Have you covered advice would you give for getting your content seen on YouTube to open? Okay, so this is an interesting one. Because I don't have a big YouTube following. My YouTube isn't that big. I'm trying to be consistent. New video coming out tomorrow if you want to check it out, by the way. Cheeky plug. But I think you have to make topical videos. Your title and thumbnail are very important. Do not overlook that. What is searchable? You have to grab people's attention. This is what we do for Origins. You have to grab people's attention in the first minute, and just overall just make good stuff. Like my personal YouTube audience isn't that big, but I am really happy with the videos I make. I think they're very high quality, and they've got me to a place where I work with a lot of brands. And for example, like Red Bull, it goes out on their YouTube channel of like 10 million subscribers. Same on Facebook and same on Red Bull TV. So even if you have a small audience and you're wanting to create videos, don't be discouraged by like views and numbers. Like if you focus on your work and you're good at what you do, like that counts overall. That is like what people like. Let's see what else is in here. Thank you, Laura, for, I don't really think there was a comment, but thank you so much. Glad you enjoyed it. What promoted the Origins pitch? Were there upscaling? Sorry, I'm trying to read really quickly. Yeah, so I guess I always kind of had this idea of making this show, and Red Bull basically said, we're going to basically bring in a bunch of creators and pitch us an idea that you're interested in. We had a week to kind of come up with that idea, and mine changed quite a bit. And people were like, okay, well, you love travel and you're interested in these different cultures and communities. So how can we link this to Red Bull? Or like, how can this work on our channels? And I kind of had a pitch that was like, I think we had like 5 minutes to pitch it. And I showed them some of my other videos. And I guess if you're pitching a show or a series to someone, the most important thing is you want to get across what it could look like. So I made some graphics and I showed people essentially what it could look like, so they could visually see that and kind of be like stoked on the idea. And then it kind of came together in the development. And yeah, that's kind of how it built out. What else have we got in here? Let me refresh as well. What would be good editing software for a total novice? For total novice, I'd say iMovie, or yeah, is it iMovie? Yeah, iMovie, or like an equivalent, or Adobe Rush, Premiere Rush. I think that's like a really great platform if you're starting out. It's really easy to use. Oh yeah, and Donna said, what program do I use? I use Premiere Pro. That is my like preferred platform of choice. I wouldn't say it's like amazing, but I like the integration between After Effects. Any advice on how to start working with brands and companies when you have a video series? Basically bring a lot of value to these people. I started working with brands on shorter videos, and just providing them with value. Looking in the early days, I noticed that Snapchat was not, some brands weren't that good at it, and I could provide some value to them. So building out a relationship and a rapport with them, and kind of not pitching like yourself like too much, but seeing how you can help and provide those people with more advice. And yeah, you'll kind of get more work by building those relationships. Guys, I see I only have 15 seconds left, so I'm going to have to leave it there. If you have any other questions, feel free to hit me up on Instagram, Andy Burgess, and I will happily answer them there. Thank you for watching. Do check out Origins if you want, or anything else that I'm doing on YouTube. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the other sessions.